One of the sort of areas of cognitive dissonance I often have writing about China, thinking about China, is we're constantly told at the sort of macro level that, oh, China's problem is household consumption is weak, people aren't spending enough. Obviously, Chloe was talking about some of that there. At the same time, we see some of these big Chinese companies, whether it's in electric vehicles, whether it's in your sort of sector, sportswear, becoming bigger, more internationally competitive, seeming to become stronger, and a bigger presence is not only in China but in the global market. So how do we marry those two phenomena, those two sort of things that we're told about China so often?
Well, that's the whole paradox, and I will not argue on the premise of what you're saying. I mean, clearly, consumption is very soft. 2025 has not been a good year. It only grew by 3.7% versus 6.5% the year before. December was really bad. Then this year we saw actually May going on a decreasing mode. So yeah, consumption is bad. Deflation continues on and it has been continuing on for years. The real estate crisis that has hurt consumer confidence so much is still there and still has its effect. Nevertheless, beneath these macro elements, there are some pockets of growth, and this is interesting, especially for those who want to work in these pockets of growth. And also, you see some real changes in what works and what doesn't work, and especially in real deep change in consumer behavior. And that makes China quite interesting because you have an incredibly difficult market, but at the same time an incredibly dynamic market, not because it's growing like hell, but because it's changing at a very fast pace and making a huge difference and showing us also the way that potentially we will see consumption change in other parts of the world. So talking about some of these pockets, obviously wellness, sports, and some niche in sports. For instance, you've seen an explosion of tennis in the very recent years. This is quite interesting. You see also that services are outpacing goods. Experience is becoming increasingly important versus goods once again. You see, for instance, secondhand doing very well versus before, just as simple as that. So these are at the same time pockets of growth that are to be looked at, but there are also really signs of a changing consumer who is no longer looking for logos or things or products that would actually show that is successful, but really demand very clearly value for money. Value for money doesn't mean something cheap. They're not trading down, but they are showing incredible discernment to really going for specialized, deliberate purchasing. They're ready to buy expensive, but there is one thing they're not ready to do is to overpay.
Right. So much more focus on value for money these days.
Yes, but value in the genuine sense of it, because sometimes when we say value for money, we think cheap, but it's not what it means. It really means that they don't want sort of like vague brand equity. They want something solid, they want function, but not just function. They want aesthetics, but I mean, they want visible value. I mean, let me give you a very small example. It's not so small, actually. Half of the luxury shoppers, before they purchase something new, luxury new product, I'm not talking secondhand, they check the secondhand market in order to see how the value of what they are about to purchase evolves over time. And they want this value to be real. And if actually the value collapses very quickly, they will not purchase this product. So I think this is quite an interesting example.
And what sort of patterns are you seeing in terms of how Chinese consumers shop, in terms of the balance between online and offline these days? How is that changing and developing? What trends are you seeing there?
Well, I think it's a trend that has been on for a certain while, but it's getting truer and truer that there is no more distinction between online and offline. In the West, we still have quite a distinction between online and offline. I think in China, it's no longer the case. To start with, and I think the example I've just given is proof of it, they research obsessively. And this research happens primarily online. Then they would typically go in a store to check the real thing, and then they will finally buy the product online, for instance, through a live streaming, and received it at home within a couple of hours. So it's completely merged, and it's the frontier between online and offline really very much blurred. So it's very different than the experience we may have in the West. And this is actually even continued by the fact that not only there is all this research that I mentioned, but also you've got all these chat groups, these clubs, which obviously they sometimes gather physically, like running clubs, since I'm talking about sports at every corner of my sentences. But you also have a lot of online gatherings, which actually maintain this continuity. And I think this is very important because this is a relatively new phenomenon. You don't want to show that you are successful. You want to purchase something, and you use these clubs, this online ecosystem, to show which tribe you belong to. And when you buy the product that fits the tribe, it's almost like a membership card.
Yeah.
And this is part of the online to offline, offline to online exchange, I would say.
Fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about the role that influence are playing in the Chinese market and how that is similar or not similar to the role of influencers in markets outside of China?
Well, I think first thing, it's a very important role. To start with, live streaming represents close to $1 billion sales, so it's quite significant. In this alone, it's quite different from the West, but it's not the only reason. I think influencers in Western markets are used to push or to drive awareness, which means that they sit at the top of the funnel. It's quite different in China, where the entire funnel actually collapses into a single live stream with discovery, persuasion, transaction on the same platform. You don't need to leave the platform, and everything in real time. So this already makes a very big difference. I think another interesting phenomenon, which is relatively recent even in China, we've gone from mega influencers, the likes of Via or Austin Lee, to micro-influencers. And micro-influencers can also happen in your own company. Actually, companies themselves organize among their staff a lot of live streaming to constantly, and it's literally 24 hours a day, do these live streamings.
So it's all part of this sort of specialization almost of the consumer market.
And tribe, yeah, it goes along, it's absolutely, because you have these micro-influencers that represent a certain tribe, and then it all happens online, either through clubs or through all these live streaming. And part of it, which is extremely important and is all the more important as people don't believe in advertising. They believe in their peers. Because they believe in their peers, they believe in these micro-influencers. And these micro-influencers provide a lot of product education. In the past, I would say that live streaming used to be more retailtainment somehow. More and more, it is all about product education sessions.
What have you perceived in how Chinese companies are dealing with the phenomenon of involution in the sense of this excessive competition that we see in so many sectors across China at the moment, and constantly falling prices, constantly narrowing profit margins? How do you see Chinese companies responding to that, and how much further do you think that phenomenon has to go? Obviously, it'll differ from sector to sector, but in general, how much longer do you think this is going to carry on?
Well, I'm going to say something that may sound provocative, but some of them don't respond, they die. A big deal of them actually disappear. This is how they respond to it. If you just think of electric vehicle companies, we started from a very high numbers, about 500. Today we are about 130 of them. And tomorrow, let's say by a few years or at the end of the decade, maybe we will be somewhere around 10, 15. So that's, unfortunately for them, the first reaction. Now, those who really try to react, obviously, some of them try to go upward. And again, let me go to a sports example with the Anta group, which is a very powerful and it's a good group, actually. They go upward not by pushing up their brand Anta, but by acquiring brands which are premium brands, like the brands that used to belong to the Amer group, like Arc'teryx, Wilson, Salomon. Arc'teryx particularly is a very high-end brand. So going up is for them a way of escaping the price game to some extent. The second, obviously, the second way of dealing with this is to go abroad. And this is actually the situation we in Europe are in. The reason, the reason is really the reason why there are so many companies coming here through exports or through setting up factories here is precisely because their margin have vanished in China. And the only way they can, on the one hand, recover some level of margin, or when they set up, let's say, manufacturing plants here in Europe, also sort of amortize the humongous cost of R&D that they have spent for a market which is not sufficient to absorb them, it's going abroad. And obviously for the strongest ones at the end, which is actually the mirror of the first point I was making, they will absorb others. So this is how they can deal. But you were asking me how long? Well, I think it's not going to be over anytime soon, even though the governments, the authorities claim, including in the last plan, but this is something that started even before in 25, that they want to control this involution by controlling the price war and et cetera, et cetera. In fact, these are only treating the symptoms, because the root cause is that you have the meeting of overcapacity and weak demand, and this is not going to be easy to fix.
It's a market process that needs to play out. Where you've seen Chinese companies taking on well-known Western brands, whether it's Wilson or Arc'teryx that you talked about, what are you seeing there? Are Chinese companies managing those brands well? As their approach to sort of managing overseas changing and evolving at all?
There are still some mistakes, that's for sure. I mean, it's still difficult in certain areas, particularly in the area of management, transparency, governance, but we see some very serious progress. Again, going back to the Anta example, clearly you can see some progress, respect for the local brands. They really kept the DNA and just sort of like help them accelerate with the typical strength of operational strength of Chinese enterprises. So here you see some good success. I think there are some other success. Even though we say a lot of very negative things about the Temu and Shein of the world, still it's big success. If you think of Pop Mart, yes, Pop Mart is not selling as much as they used to, but it was a huge success, and they are going also, they recently established headquarters in England, for instance, which is showing that they want to root themselves, to anchor themselves locally and not to do it the way it used to be done.
Absolutely. And then for companies, multinational companies or companies that are thinking of going into China or are already in China in this very tough market right now, what's your takeaway for them? I mean, you've talked about China as a sort of laboratory. Some people talk about it as a gymnasium that you've got to be in to keep fit.
Absolutely.
As a Western company these days. What do you mean by that laboratory term, and what's your broader takeaway for foreign companies in China now?
So first, I mean, first part of your question, it is a very tough market. I think for smaller companies, I would advise most of them to go with a partner, a local partner, because they won't be able to face it. It's just simply has become too difficult to some extent. However, as I said at the beginning, there are some true pockets of growth and some true opportunities, but then you need to localize, not just by adapting your product, but by really adapting your operation. And that goes to your second point, that you don't go to China only, quote unquote, to sell your products in China, but you also go to China to learn from China. And this is something, in this sense, it is where the laboratory story is. And it's true in every sector, obviously in discretionary consumption, but also in, I mean, very remarkably in the car industry. You can see that most of the car makers have established very big R&D centers in China in order to learn and also to absorb into their ways of working some of the strength of China. And this is indeed, they call it the fitness gym because of this, yeah.
I think we've got time for one question and then we'll wrap up. So, Rhea, do you have a question coming in?
Yes, so we actually have two questions, so I'm going to be democratic and pick the first one that came in. How do you see the Chinese and international art market, contemporary and non-contemporary, developing with respect to Chinese consumers?
It's not my expertise to start with.
We have plenty of other questions.
It's not true consumption, but so no, I would not be expert enough to talk about the art market in China.
I'll move on then to the next question. Given the growing transfer of wealth towards women and rejection of marriage and childbearing, is this shift becoming more visible in patterns of domestic consumption?
It's not that much. I mean, it doesn't affect domestic consumption massively. Because it's part of what you were talking with Chloé Froissart before. One of the multiple ways people sort of like oppose the dictates, social or political norms that they are forced on them is to, on the contrary, sort of like look at themselves and spend a lot more time, energy, and money on their well-being. This is also the role that sports and gyms play. For instance, Pop Mart is also the role it plays. I mean, Pop Mart, if you think in communist terms, it's absolutely a nonsense to buy to collect little dolls, ugly little dolls at that. So in that sense, it's a halo of things that affect consumption. It's not just marriage.
Yes, the Labubu story is one I will never fully understand. Sandrine, thank you so much for your contributions there.